Hello, everyone. Welcome to the latest episode of Start Small, Think Big podcast brought to you by Digital Meld. My name is Brad Groux, co-founder and CEO of Digital Meld.
I'm Allen Martinez. Thanks for having me. And I'm going to talk about how companies aren't building AI, they're actually scaling improvisation.
Yeah, they certainly are, especially a lot of things have happened since our pre-call for this that we can talk about. So Alan has a lot of experience when it comes to AI and governance. We talk about governance and security and best practices all the time. Everything we do is trying to be done by best practice. So I think it's great to have Alan on. He's actually writing a book on it. So I think, he's authority on it. So we can't wait to hear what you more to say. So Alan, why don't you just take a couple of minutes, tell them about your background, how you got here, and how you ended up in the wacky world of AI.
Well, thanks for having me, Brad. Appreciate being on your podcast. I started in design, Art Center College Design. I was trained by Linda Weinman. You may know her from lynda.com. She sold it to LinkedIn for $1.5 billion. And then I got handpicked by Quentin Tarantino right out of design school to direct for his commercial division, A Band Apart. So over the years, my work deployed about $25 billion in media for all the blue chip brands. And, I have some work that ended up in MoMA, New York City. So I've kind of balanced performance and then the art of it and balancing those two things. And then I opened my own agency, Noble Digital, in 2012. And there I was trained by a razorfish strategist, and I got way into strategy and really kind of understanding what all my production background kind of built up to and how to design for that. But I think probably what impacted me the most for my AI book that is actually complete now and available on Amazon, it's called the Brand Experience AI Operating System. It was inspired by, Steve Blank's methodology. It was inspired by the business model canvas because there's a lot of diagrams in there. And beyond just governance, we're also talking about the identity of the AI, because AI is going to eventually be experiential. I mean, it is now, but we can design for that. And of course, we want accountability. So we need receipts to know what was going on under the hood. But my background kind of helped me understand, not just to make things look pretty, but actually have engineering behind it. So that background helped me scale the biggest Shark Tank exit for 300 million. And why that matters today for AI is when you're directing on a set with millions of people running around, your job is coherence, right? And you're coordinating dozens of teams, each have their own incentives, and everybody wants something different. And I'm trying to be there as a bottleneck on purpose. That's by design, because you're optimizing every team around the story in this case. And of course, when it comes to corporation, it's your brand story, right? And your brand experience actually also encapsulates user experience, employee experience, and of course, customer experience. So all those things are within brand experience. And that's the biggest lever you have. And I would just say that if nobody's job is coherence, then you don't get a movie and you just get a pile of clips that don't add up to a story. The same thing with your AI. If you're just going to slap on pieces and parts and tools, I know it's fun to do that, but it also can be dangerous unless you have some kind of holistic strategy to actually put them all together so it can scale responsibly without getting you in embarrassing situations.
Yeah. We preach laying that foundation that, everything we do, we start with a great foundation. Generally, like when we talk with our customers or partners, as we call them, we start with a discovery session. And it's just like, I just need to understand you. I need to understand your business. I just need to understand your pain points. I need to understand the things you're really good at, things that you really struggle at. And it's just an honest reflection of, internally of how they do things. And the only way you can actually build things that are meaningful, that will drive actual impact, is to take those self-reflections and understand and look inward before you try to look outward. And I think, artists obviously do that as well. A lot of what they put out on the canvas or on the film screen is coming from internal struggles and internal journeys and things like that. It's funny you mentioned Linda, because I was a lifetime subscriber to Linda before it was bought for LinkedIn, and I'm still a lifetime subscriber because I have LinkedIn Premium. So I've probably 80% of what I've learned
really
is probably been LinkedIn and LinkedIn Learning and lynda.com. I've done courses at Harvard Extension and edX and stuff like that, but I've done 1,000 courses probably between LinkedIn Learning and lynda.com. And so I was actually stoked whenever because Microsoft bought LinkedIn, obviously. And I think that happened whenever I actually was an employee at Microsoft. So I got it for free. No, I got to pay for it, but still it's a great resource, and that's a great journey.
And if I was smart, I would have followed on her path and made a brand for $1 billion and sold LinkedIn as well. But here I am.
Yeah, it is. I think I have a couple of those in my past too. It's like, if I would have, could have, should have, but you just got to follow the heart, I guess. Cool. So, what led you to kind of make that pivot, I guess, to focusing on AI and governance and those sorts of things? And not only that, but what led you to write a book? That seems like kind of out of your comfort zone from a perspective of coming from a creator to writing a technical book.
No, not really. I would say creativity is more important with AI right now. Look, we
100%.
have
Yeah.
all the tech and the tools is available. What I'm going to talk about today is all doable today, and barely anybody's doing it, right? And I think it's also the sequencing of how you do it is really important. And I think coming from a design background and understanding systems thinking and all that is really critical. And so it all started when I was trying to help a client with something, and I realized I was trying to find how to put it together. No one had written the book really. I mean, the information's out there, but it's in bits and pieces, and it's kind of a mess. And I had to just put the building blocks together. Data primitives. We're talking about first principles thinking, and just started building the blocks until I had a picture of everything that needed to be put together. And I'm talking about the nth degree, like what I don't see companies quite doing yet. There's a few glimmers of like what I'm talking about, like JP Morgan deployed AI internally to about 200,000 employees last year, or 2024 actually. So that means they got the guardrails on. My solution is talking about the guardrails, but it's also about the identity, which is more front facing. They had an internal workflow, and of course the guardrails of like the accountability of understanding what this black box is doing, so it becomes a glass box, right? And so I would say an example of what I'm talking about is a mid-market company has three systems touching the same customer, right? So the marketing automation promises white glove onboarding, the sales CRM promises we can customize anything, and then supports ticketing system sees the actual contract and routes them to a 48-hour queue, which pisses off the client. And now you're trying to like save that client, and it made a mess. And that's called the collision. And the collision is that you have three systems with three separate AIs, and they're not talking to each other. So what needs to start happening if you're really serious about AI is you need to start connecting the data so that all these three systems, I'm just giving you one example. Like this is going to be, exponential across the company, but like that one example, you need to be connecting your data sources to those things. Right. And so that it needs to know that, oh, this already happened. This is the time they entered as a customer, and this is how I should respond, and all that. But where does that all come from? Besides the rules of that, you need to have your certain red lines about what it can do, what it cannot do, so that legal's happy. You need to have the voice sound like your actual brand, so that marketing is happy, right? And then you need those receipts so CTO can say, I can figure out what happened in minutes and not like 4 days, 4 weeks, or 4 months of reconstruction, right? You want it to be 4 minutes of retrieval instead of 4 months of reconstruction, right? So that you're not thinking about this now because you're barely in it, but when you get there, this is like the beginning of the internet, right? It's like the websites were ridiculous 25 years ago. If you wanted to change a logo on 50 pages, you had to change it 50 times because there's no CMS to like do that at scale. So there's no real system for AI, and my system sits at the top layer of the behavioral governance of the AI. And that all comes from leadership. This is not a technical thing at all. It's like the information that the AI needs is actually in your brand. And that's why it's called the brand experience AI operating system, because brand experience encompasses everything, what you're about, who your customers are, and how you want to talk to each other. And so if you don't think of this in a holistic way, it's going to be really difficult because this is not, I think people are buying AI like it's SaaS, like it's a SaaS tool, right? In the old days, and it's not. It's not deterministic. It's probabilistic, and it needs a different kind of wrapper, so to speak, in order to capture that.
Yeah, agreed. And it's funny you mentioned this because everything you're speaking resonates with us here at Digital Meld and myself specifically. About an hour before we recorded, this is February 6th, Friday, we launched brainmeld.io to solve that actual problem you're talking about, where you have data coming from disparate systems, and mainly we're focusing on agentic AI, right? So right now everybody's
Okay,
wearing OpenClaw or Claudebot on their desktops, and they're
right.
capturing all this data in MD
And what do you
files.
think about that, Brad?
It's transformed my life. Like it literally has, but
Right.
but from a governance perspective, it's an absolute nightmare, right? Like it's an absolute nightmare. And so like we've come up with a solution. We think for working with small teams, this is not going to work in an enterprise. It's not going to work at a JP Morgan, at least not
Yeah.
initially. And I don't even think
Right.
it would
Right.
eventually, but like where you set up a team of people, and a team of, you have a team, 3, 4, 5, 10, 20 people, and then they're all collecting their data and their agents are doing those things. And then that goes back to a central repository. And then you use a quorum, much like if anybody knows clustering from back in the day, server clustering, if two of the three vote on one thing, then the third one's left out. Like that's how we envision this. And so we literally just launched this an hour ago. But it's going to be open source. I'll put a link on the screen, but brainmeld.io, this sounds a little familiar from that Star Trek show, but no IP there.
And let's talk about that fear for a second. Everyone's afraid. Let me just clarify something. Flying in a plane, aviation's dangerous, right? And what did we do? We created regulations. We got pilots that had to be taught about aerodynamics and understand not just the how to fly the plane, but the actual aerodynamics of how the physics of flying works. And it is still dangerous today, and yet we throw our money at it, right? So it's not that it's impossible. It's absolutely possible, but you have to respect it and you have to put those guardrails on so that you can have a functioning version. And so I don't think this is a tool problem or anything. It's a coherence problem because what I've built is the principles layer that sits above all the tools. And so when you encode your company's voice, your boundaries and your proof requirements are done, like that's a one-time thing. And now, just to give you an example, like when you go into Canva, you set up your custom colors, right? And what can you do? Now you have the guardrails of the brand identity set, and you can design all you want without going off brand. For example, it's going to be the same thing, but more with how it speaks to you or how it writes to you, because it's going to be within a messaging ladder. An angry customer might have a certain escalation flow that's going to be different than someone who's excited to come back for a new product or whatever. So all that needs to be structured, and that's way and well before anybody's doing any engineering. And a perfect example is websites. Like you don't just call up a coder and say, "Build my website." They're going to ask you a million billion questions that you want to have answers for. So you need your front end designer to map that whole thing out and present it to you, the board, the leadership, and go, "Is this what you want?" And they go, "Yeah." And then you can turn around and that's all specced out for engineering to build. This is going to be a whole uh, marketplace that's going to start to form soon. Right now, we have a lot of tools and toys and stuff, but I think it's like people like you and I that are going to be important when we have to put this together in the right way and integrate it together. That's going to not cause chaos.
Yeah, the funny thing is I met with some college students at Texas A&M last week, and I do that quite regularly. I kind of mentor them, and then they were like, a young kid came up to me and was like, "Hey, what framework do I need to learn? What stack do I need to learn?" I said, "Who cares
Right,
about that? Talk." And
right.
I had whenever because I was at
Nice.
a happy hour where it wasn't a happy hour because there was no drinks, but with kids, and like I was handing him, I literally have a process flow diagram. I'm like, "This is what you need to know." Business process. A
Nice.
business process is a business process, whether it's $1 billion company
Right.
or a two-person
Absolutely.
company. And the process of procedures and SOPs, standard operating procedures, that's everything. And that's the world AI lives at. Like, and so you need to start thinking in process first. And that's what we do with our customers. We go on site, like,
That's
do
great.
you have your processes documented? No. Well, let's start there. Let's get on a whiteboard. Let's make this happen. And but you're 100% right that like when you bring up all the advancements of the past, future favors the bold. That's a saying for a reason. You have to be a little bit a risk adverse to a little risky
Right.
to reach for the stars. But you could do it wisely. Like, you know what I mean? You don't have to just strap some dynamite on your back and think you're going to get to the moon. So, but I think it's really important. We're all about process. That's what we do.
Yeah, and you're right. It's like nobody's asking what happens when two of these systems touch the same customer. Can they contradict each other? I'll bet you $1 million they will, and they can, right? And the answer is almost always yes. So when they do, you get caught by what I call intelligence debt, the hidden cost of cleaning up after your own automation. And you don't want to be in that because if it happened today, believe me, it'll happen 5 minutes later or a day later, and you'll be chasing that forever. And I'm not even talking about like regulation yet. That's looming. The EU is ahead of us. A lot of my build partners are there, so I'm kind of used to designing for regulation. But understand that I'm not sitting here like saying do regulation because the government requires it. I mean, of course you want to be compliant. I'm saying do regulation because you want to control your system inside. You want that control. You don't want to create chaos because when you start to rip away at your brand, that can take years to repair. Right? That's even harder than a technical collision that you can fix in an afternoon, for example, or maybe longer.
No, definitely. And I think, let's get back to this governance bit and like your guide or framework for how do you do that. The AI
Sure.
pyramid, if you will, is governance, identity, and receipts. Can you just take people on like why that's important and how you can easily, if you follow these steps and put this into place, how leaders specifically can quickly find ways where there's gaps within their
Yeah.
organization.
So governance is your charter. This is the machine enforceable rules that define what AI can say, what it can do, what it cannot, and also when to escalate to human. Understand that a lot of times we're working with engineers are working with Boolean logic, which is for those who don't know, it's just on or off, yes or no, right? And that's binary. But there's other states like null and unknown, and right, and you can start using the third and fourth state to help AI understand that okay, if I don't have the answer, I don't need to make up one because that's where it gets caught in a lie. And so you can start to design this around actual the constraints that it has. You can give it more paths to go out of again because it's not a deterministic system. You need to give it that release valve, so to speak, right? So that's governance. Identity in my model means brand identity. Okay, it's your canon, but it's your voice, it's your values hierarchy, your red lines, your tone profiles that stop AI from sounding like a generic bot. And more importantly, it stops it from making promises you can't keep. And that's where the legal part gets in, right? And the last is the receipts. That's the evidence packets. They're the decision time proof that shows what happens, what rules fired, and how the output aligned with the canon and who owned the override. So when someone asks, why did this happen? You have evidence and not a reconstruction progress, right? So access control still matters, but it answers a different question, I think. It's, is it allowed to touch the data, for example? If the canon answers, is it allowed to say that? So we need these broken apart because these are separate functions of the AI. And again, what I'm describing to everybody, this is happening in milliseconds, which is amazing, right? But all this thinking, all these possible decision trees need to happen, and they happen in a millisecond. And the hardest part, I would say, is the actual architecture of that path for any situation. And some of you are thinking, oh, so we have to think of a million possibilities? No, that's not what I'm talking about. If anything, I said the word principles. That's different than rules. Let me give you an example of a rule. A rule is like the 10 commandments, right? And Brad will give you $1,000,000 if you can list them all, but I'm just kidding. But the 10 commandments are like, if you do this, don't do this, don't do this, right? A principle is love thy neighbor. And if you follow love thy neighbor, then you're going to hit all the 10 commandments. You're going to be protected. So you have to think on a higher level versus just like on the actual local level of each interaction. Otherwise, yeah, you'll be there. You'll have 1,000 pages of rules before the AI can even give you a response, and that's going to cost you tokens. It's going to slow down the lag time. All those kind of things.
Yeah, I like what you're speaking. Setting the frameworks and with the principles is really great. It gives that nuance without nuance, right? So it covers
Right.
a wide net
And lets
with
it
that
think
same
probabilistically.
Yeah.
That's the magic of AI. You don't want to. The thing that engineers are sometimes doing, what I'm seeing is they're putting the AI in a straitjacket. Congratulations, no one's going to get sued, right? But it also feels like a bot from 10 years ago. So what was the point, right? Why even bother? And so yeah, you want to have it. You want to give it some of that magic still that makes it powerful and insightful for sure.
Yeah, and the best way to do that is with standard operating procedures and setting
There you
those
go.
things. And with the agentic AI world, for folks that don't know, and I'll have some videos coming out on my YouTube and other stuff talking about this and how I've been using agentic AI, specifically OpenClaw slash
Nice.
Claudebot, whatever it is. You set those principles in like the soul.md file and the agents.md file, and you basically you're giving it parameters to say, every time you do this, I want you to do this. Like, as an example, every time I have it submit some of my changes to GitHub, I'm like,
Right.
make sure that there's no private information being synced to GitHub, because you know what happened one time I did it and there was some private information synced to GitHub, and like I was like, whoop, and to remove all that was a big pain in the butt. You got to go delete the history, and then everybody else has to reclone. So just know that you need to do that due diligence before. You need to get that, and like a pyramid is a perfect example. You have to set that foundation, and then you build them on top of that, right? Like that's probably
Right.
something to do with why you have that.
Exactly. And I love that we're talking about this because all I'm trying to do is approach this holistically and not like one at a time. Otherwise, you're going to be playing whack-a-mole, right? So leaders always ask, like, what do we do first? And the answer is always going to be all three together, because you have to understand that you can't just do governance or just identity or just the receipts, because these are load-bearing walls, right? You can't build one without the other. They're contingent on each other. So when companies do governance first and ignore brand identity, then they write beautiful policy documents and the AI follows them perfectly, but the outputs are legally correct, but the customer experience goes dead, right? When they do identity, now it represents you in a wonderful way, sounds on point, your customers love it, but now it's making promises that can get you in trouble and legal has to deal with, right? So you're getting causing problems in that area. And when you do identity receipts, or rather accountability receipts, they can't prove the system stayed on brand when it mattered. So you're actually reconstructing evidence under pressure with, imagine doing that with, the government waiting for your answer, and that's not going to be fun, right? And now everybody's like looking at your AI and leadership's like pissed off. So when they skip receipts entirely, they can't audit, they can't defend it in litigation, and they can't improve because they have no feedback loop.
No, the receipts is really important to me. I'm glad you kind of focused on there and you said the perfect world auditability. I think coming from the world of IT and being in IT, I've always called it CYA, cover your ass, right? Like that's the goal, is you always want to document everything you do. And so like whenever I'm working with my agents, they store their data in their little world where they live. And I also have them repeat that as well. I say, all right, you're storing this data here in your folder. I want it repeated in my Obsidian, vault. And so I have a copy of both. And then not only that, generally I'll have them create me a file too as part of that export process. And people, I get asked by someone on, I was a conversation with yesterday. He's like, why do you do that? And I was like, why not? It takes very little. They've already generated the information. Generating the actual files themselves and stuff is very little. And that comes
Right.
CYA. It's more information
Right.
that the bots can learn from, and it's more information that I can always refer back to if I ever come across an issue.
Exactly. And I know you love accounts payable automation, right?
Yeah.
So you wouldn't deploy a payment bot without knowing who authorized it to cut checks to, right? Or what approval thresholds it must follow, or and a log of every payment process. That's three layers built together. And AI is the same. You do all three together. Even if the first version is lightweight, you want all this kind of mapped out so you can start to like get feedback loops and see where do you need to like focus or dial up things or dial things down in those different areas.
Yeah, and I guess since you're saying you need to do all these three things at the same time, that should hopefully allude to folks that this isn't a top-down decision. This is a we're all in decision, right? It's everyone across the
Right.
organization. The only people that know what those receipts are in accounts billable are the people who process invoices. Like, you know what I mean? So
Right.
you have to talk to those
Right.
people. It can't be a directive. It's got to be like, this is just the way we're doing it. We're all rowing in the same direction, right?
So here's how my solution scales. When we're operating from the brand identity, I'm getting leadership in a room and I'm pulling what's out of their brain, and I'm creating the logic that's going to inform the YAML that we're going to make for the machine learning. And what that means is that, how do I put this? I'm trying to explain this in an easy way. So you're trying to get all these things together, and so from the leadership, because if they don't do that and they start building, leadership's not going to know what happened. So we need that documentation from leadership, and then I'm taking all that rich qualitative data before we turn it into something that's more, Boolean logic, right? If that, then, or all that kind of stuff. And so this becomes important because then now you can tweak the machine. And yes, like what you said, now I can run around to any department and I can build one workflow. Once I do that work, I can go to a department and build one workflow. And guess what? It's going to be congruent with the entire company. So if there's hundreds of departments, I can go across and it will always be in alignment. And this is going to be very important, especially for external workflows, but also for employee experience to be delightful, right? What does the voice feel like? And maybe each department can tune that around each department the way they like. But when it comes to customer facing stuff, we're going to need to pull from the brand and vision from leadership to understand what that should be about.
Yeah, let's revisit the constraints again because you mentioned straitjacketing and how that doesn't solve any problems. And so how are you seeing companies like over constrain, and then how do you help leadership and or the boots on the ground, as we say, find that right balance between not giving AI all the keys to the kingdom, but unlocking it
Right.
enough to get it to its full potential?
Well, let me put it this way: brakes let you drive fast. Okay, if you didn't have brakes, you wouldn't drive that fast. Think of it that way. People think governance slows you down, and I think that's wrong. If your car had no brakes, you would drive 10 miles an hour because you'd be terrified of corners. Right? So you can, with ceramic brakes, you can drive 100 miles an hour into a corner, and you would trust that it'll stop. I'm guilty of that too many times. I don't drive 100 miles an hour anymore, but you know what I'm saying. But the constraints should be binary and narrow. The things that never happen, never promise a delivery date the system can't fulfill, never disclose pricing that isn't in the approved matrix, never bypass the escalation triggers when confidence drops below the threshold. These aren't creative limitations, these are physics, right? So outside of those hard boundaries, let the AI run, let it personalize, adapt, learn, and surprise you. The probabilistic upside of all this is very real, and we haven't seen it yet. But there's also the fact that I'm talking about, like, governance is just table stakes. I'm saying you need this in order for me to actually do the work that you actually want, which is like how to scale this, how to have predictive intelligence, how to have it remember something you did 5 years ago that worked really well that you all forgot about, or because someone left the company and it's been forgotten. So you now have institutional memory that's activated. You're getting the cerebral cortex of the corporation activated, and the AI is going to leverage that. And now we're not doing these quarterly reports of what happened in a retroactive way. We're going to be having real time updates from the data, because remember, it's looking at your first party data. And if you remember the promise of the past 25 years of big data, we never quite achieved it. And the biggest problem was attribution, because we're not robots, we're not computers. And it's really hard to do that. So the AI can look at unstructured data and figure it out. It doesn't have to be vectorized. It can probably figure out what's going on 1,000 times better and faster than a human ever could. And so imagine that being leveraged daily in real time, having constant updates of maybe you have a new offer, what's working with customers and what's not. And you're going to see everything performing and also the AI making recommendations. So I think it's going to get really excited. And I think the companies that strangle the AI, that you were bringing up, they're usually compensating for the fact that they've never defined the hard boundaries. So they try to control everything instead of controlling only what matters.
Okay, great. Yeah, it really puts a good perspective on it. Is again, if you don't think of it, then you're going to overcorrect, like you said. And I think that's the if you lay that foundation, then again, that's the guiding principles. You don't even have to think it. It's like the set it and forget it mindset, right? And I think so. Where do you see that? Have you noticed that like companies have overcorrected, or how can you train people up or have them identify areas where they may be going down the path of overcorrection without realizing it?
Yeah, I mean, I think constraints live on three levels. Like there's the policy level, like what the AI is never allowed to do, encoded before deployment. And again, that's before you deploy that, it's being encoded from leadership as their constitutional charter. And it doesn't change per interaction. That's always going to be like set, right? Then there's the workflow level, escalation triggers, approval gates, human in the loop checkpoints for high stake decisions. This is decision rights architecture. And that might be modified and optimized over time, right? Depending on how you like it or what comes back. Then there's the access level, who can deploy, who can modify what data can flow in and out. And this is where like enterprise solutions like SailPoint lives, right? And so, and we talked about this, like they give an AI an identity card, which is great. However, they haven't given AI governance rail and a persona to operate when it's inside. Even though it gave it a access card, it doesn't give it control over what it's doing inside once it's let in. It's still a black box. So I think where this could backfire with prompt engineers, I see teams trying to constrain behavior through prompts, like always be helpful, but never promise anything we can't deliver. That's not a constraint. That's a wish, right? So prompts are soft. Models they drift, and new versions ship. So your guardrail disappears because it was never a guardrail. It was a suggestion text box. So that's one backfire. The other backfire would be over constraining the output instead of the decision. So teams review every AI output before it ships. We didn't even talk about the fact that they're going to be spending like, maybe they save 10 hours, but then they're spending 10 hours reconstructing or fixing something or making the mistakes that the AI made, right? And that kind of kills the speed and defeats the purpose anyway. So we can constrain the decision logic upstream, and then audit the outputs downstream. Then you don't create a human bottleneck in the middle.
That's good advice. Most of the businesses in the United States are small business and mid market, so 1,000 below employees, and those kind of organizations. People wearing multiple hats, especially in the mid market space, where you don't necessarily have a CISO or a CTO or a CIO. You
Yeah.
probably maybe have a COO and a CEO and maybe head of finance. Where do these like you see these roles in organizations like that live, where the folks who are driving this governance?
It's all kinds of people in different departments, but I think overall it tends to be the champions. It tends to be the A types that are really, they're typically excited about AI. They obviously want to leverage it. And that's where it also kind of breaks down, because sometimes they're doing what I call the shadow ledger. They're doing this. Maybe the corporation has a lot of rules about this. And so they go, if I tell corporate, then they're not going to let me do it. I'll just do it on the side. And that's where you start to create problems, right? So you don't want to like squash your champions, because they're going to be the leaders of this. So they're the ones that are going to make you look good eventually, but we need to give them a playground to work within. So you want to, sponsor someone who can own the risk and the budget. Usually it's the CFO or the COO in the mid market, and their job is to air cover, protecting the initiative when someone pushes back. And then the owner is the operational champion who runs it day to day, someone who understands the workflows, has the credibility with boots on the ground teams, like you said, and translate between the technical reality versus the executive expectations, right? And often a senior ops director or the most process minded IT leader you have, right? So, and the builder is whoever implements, right? Internal team, fractional CTO, people like you, Brad, right? So the failure mode is when the sponsor is also the owner, right? Now you have someone with strategic authority, but no bandwidth to manage the details. Or when the owner has no sponsor and they're pushing uphill with no air cover, and the first time sales pushes back on a governance rule, they get overruled. So that's kind of the politics that's happening that I'm seeing.
Yeah, and one other area that also falls within not just mid market, but a lot of mid market, but really even enterprises is shadow IT, right? People bringing their own systems, their own solutions. What can you give to leadership advice you can give to leadership or people in those sorts of positions to make sure that they're reining in, but again, not necessarily stamping it all out because you love the fact that this person's passionate and they want to use these tools, but like what do you see the balance between managing that risk and then also encouraging that usage?
I'm thinking that the sponsor should own the why and the champion should own the how, right? The sponsor decides we're doing this. Here's the investment. Here's the risk tolerance. I'll defend this in the boardroom. And then the champion decides here's the roadmap. Here's the standard. Here's what we're deploying this quarter. And maybe even, here's a roadmap for the next year or two, whatever. The authority to stop a risky deployment must live with the champion because it has to be explicitly granted by the sponsor. And because they're in the weeds and they're going to see it day to day where the sponsor might be disattached from the day-to-day operations like that. So I think a checklist might look something like authority to block any AI touching customers, tracks, pricing, or regulated workflows, authority to require registration of any AI tool before it ships, authority to demand proof when the system did, what the system did, why, and who approved it. I think a direct escalation line to the sponsor when business pressure tries to bypass the rules. If they don't have those four things, they're more of a documenter than a governor.
Yeah. That's definitely true. You put the guardrails in place and you have to defend them, right? And the only way you do that is you have the policies in place to do that. So another area, again, we're trying to sell AI and automation. We're trying to create what we call the cult of AI. It's one reason this podcast exists, is trying to tell people what's possible and that they can do it. But one of the elephant in the room with all of these use cases is ROI, the business use case versus the cost and the AI spend. And people hope that, business leaders obviously have to think that that can run away. And we've seen it where people they didn't set their thresholds or something. They come back. It's no different than the cloud model. They come back the next day and they spend $100,000 on something they thought they were only going to spend $1,000 on this month. But how do you build a business case that's defensible and protects the sponsor, as you call them, whenever you're building these solutions?
I mean, look, the director's fear is rational. If we spend money on AI and it gets messy, I will wear it. So the business case cannot be hype, right? It cannot be a vague time savings or something like that. So I would say start with one workflow where mistakes are expensive and invisible, like refunds and claims. I know that's why you love that accounts payable, right? Discounts, onboarding, vendor approvals. I think anything where a wrong promise creates cost. And then you can measure four baselines around that before you touch it, which is like cycle time, rework time, escalation volume, customer impact, like the complaints and everything. So I think you should implement governance in that one lane and measure the change. Not AI feels helpful, but measure the reduction in rework and reduction in incidents. And that's how you walk a CFO conversation into a CFO conversation and say, we removed the cleanup, we reduced the risks, we improved throughput, and here are the receipts. And that way it protects the sponsor because it turns AI from a faith project into an operating improvement with evidence. And if it works, you got proof. And if it doesn't, you can contain the blast radius to one workflow. And now we can figure out, because we created receipts, we can start to figure out what to optimize.
Yeah, and one area we regularly visit is basically whenever we come on to a new partner, a new customer, we have them immediately stand up, if they don't already have one, a center of excellence. And that's bringing in stakeholders from all across the organization who have a say, because again, how best AI is used in operations is completely different how it's going to be used in sales. It's going to be different how it's going to be used in HR. The only way you're going to understand the way so that it can work within those organizations is to understand how they're all, be empathetic to all of their needs and all other things. But actually, the main reason we do it is for data, because the data is in disparate systems. We have duplicates of data and we have schemes. There's no standards in place. There's no naming standards in place, anything like that. Can you talk about how the importance of having that center of excellence and or those standards in place, and then how, again, especially in the mid-market companies, they don't have months, years of runway to make this happen. How can they do that in a lean way?
You mean for the standards?
Yeah, just the center of excellence as a whole, like having that whole, setting those standards, setting those governance. Again, they could probably need to be a little bit more nimble, right?
Well, you need three people, first of all, right? You don't need a department. You need a triad, one person from legal risk. They're the breaks. They can define what the AI can never do. They review escalation thresholds. And weekly, they might review flagged incidents and update the prohibited list. And we optimize that, right? And then you need one person from brand or marketing or customer ops. They're the voice. They define how the AI should sound, what promises are on brand. And they might review sample outputs, flag tone drift, update approved language. And then the third person is from IT and operations. They're their engine. They know what's deployed, where the data flows. And hopefully they're keeping track of the shadow ledger, right? Like they still need to keep track of people that are doing this in the shadows, maybe without IT knowing. So they have to keep on top of that as well. But weekly they maintain the inventory, they enforce regulation and coordinate with the identity structure. So the triad can meet like once a week. They can review the receipts, they can surface collisions, and they can prioritize what to fix. As far as the four standards, I would say, non-negotiable from day one, like one, naming convention, right? Every AI system has a standard name that tells you what it does. So who owns that? What environment is it in? It sounds trivial, but when you have 15 automations and nobody can tell you which one handles refunds, and you can't govern what you can't identify. And I have three more. I think the second one would be like registration requirement, like no AI ships without being logged in a central inventory, the tool name, owner, what data it touches. Three would be escalation protocol. Every AI workflow has a defined trick. And when it escalates to a human, low confidence, edge case, policy ambiguity, all that stuff, an emotional customer. And again, if you don't define this on day one, every workflow invents its own. And don't expect your tech team to do this. This is leadership work, or leadership bringing in all the department heads and figuring this out with someone like me. And then four is like evidence standard. Like every AI decision that affects customers, money, or risk must produce a receipt. Define the minimum fields, timestamp decisions, rule apply, data inputs owner, all that stuff. So these four standards let you scale without chaos. If you skip them, every new deployment makes the problem worse.
Yeah, definitely. And again, I think that's a very. I would disagree with those needing those four and those being like pretty close to the bare minimums. There's not really one that I would say like, you could probably get by without that. I think to me the most important one's always going to be receipts and standardization, just the standardization of the data, and then you can kind of figure out everything else on the fly. But you have to again, we have that discovery
Would
session.
you add others, by the way? Would you have others you think you might add?
For like a mid-market company, probably not. Other than maybe a communication aspect of it. Again,
Yeah.
this only succeeds if people get bought in, and so you need champions to help spread that word. You need to communicate. You need to let them know what's happening. You can't come 6 months down the line and say, "Hey, we've been working on this 6 months, and this is how we're going to do things going forward." I think it takes a village, as they say, and I think that's the beauty of AI is it like what I say it all the time, helps people punch above their weight class. Like you have to
Yeah,
understand that's that,
absolutely.
and we're all at different weight classes, right? So everybody still has a chance to punch up or deserves a chance to punch up. And the only way you could really do that is to talk to everybody. So that's,
Exactly. It's funny. In the
yeah.
book, I had a little thing about Cleo Abrams. She had a little clip about she used some design tools. Her, who's not a designer, with an actual designer. And although her work was way better because she wasn't a designer, it looked great. The designer, she said, was flying. It was like way better than the work she did. So I mean, there's also, we're all different weight classes, but who do you assign to do what with that advantage that they have? And I think it's more than one. We're still coming out of the industrial era, hangover. We're still. I think people are still thinking like assembly line, and I really think when you start to hire new kinds of employees, this change management that's going to happen. I think we're looking for people that can probably handle a lot of different things, not just one thing. They could probably handle an entire department. That's not for everybody, but if you want an AI company or you're an AI first company, like if you're a smaller startup trying to do the future where we have like a 1 or 10 person company competing with blue chips, that could eventually happen, right? That's that reality. This all points towards like the brand advantage that I was talking about earlier, because once you get this foundation in place, then you can start to do the actual fun, magical part. And that's really the promise of the book.
Yeah, you bring a good point about people wearing multiple hats and doing multiple things. To me, going forward, that should be everybody. It's going to be everybody,
Yeah.
even in the corporate world,
Yeah.
because that's just the world we live in. As an example, I have an AI system and I have 10 bots. I have 10 agents that run. I have one that's an
Right.
orchestrator. I have one that's a researcher. I have a couple that act like interns that do the bare menial stuff, and they're using different models, which cost less because the lower they are, that's those
Right.
different weight classes, right? And so
Right.
I'm managing a team of bots as I'm running a company, managing people as well, and then that's how it's going to be. You're going to have these bots that come along with you throughout your journey at the organization. They're going to follow you along and learn more about you and do more things. You're going to be a manager, whether you like it or not. If you don't embrace these tools, you're going to get left behind, because you're going to have some 22-year-old kid who comes into the HR department with their 4-year degree, and they have a whole HR team, with them, and they're working with them 24. Like I literally load up my bots with tasks, like 100 tasks before I go to bed, and I wake up in the morning and most of them are done.
Wow.
If they're not done, it's because I hit my threshold of my tokens or something like that. And again, it's capturing data. I mean, it's research data. It's like
Right.
tasks. I don't let them do stuff at night whenever something could break, and like
Right.
go out and buy $1,000 worth of goods off of
Right.
Amazon or something. But like the menial tasks of just going and doing market research, for sure. And I would think faith in your ability to figure things out is going to be the single most important aspect as a human going forward. You have to believe that you can figure this out, and you have the world at your fingertips here. So there's really no excuses. And if you're listening to this podcast, you have a phone, let's be honest. And so you have the ability, you have the world at your fingertips. And that's my biggest thing, is like, and communication's the area where I see the biggest lag. Every organization I go to, the ones that are run really well, they communicate well, and everybody has a voice. Not every voice is treated the same. I'm sorry, this isn't a utopia. Not every voice is treated the same, but everybody has a voice, and
Right.
they're free to speak that. But the ones that the working in the silos, this is where like I love the mid market more than the enterprise, is because they're just more nimble, right? It takes a long time to move a huge ship, but a little little bass boat
And
can
they
maneuver
can't
around.
afford to get this wrong. It'll be
Yeah.
very it'll hurt them a lot more than an enterprise. An enterprise can probably take the hit, but
Yeah,
in the market,
of course.
right?
Yeah, that's the thing is you have the ability to take some hits and, you know,
Like the Chevy chop bot incident where it sold
yeah.
the Chevy Tahoe for $1, like that kind of stuff. Like they made fun of them. It was embarrassing, but they're fine.
Yeah, and it's probably a great loss for them because they get to write it off as a loss, and then also they get all the attention from it. Like, no such thing as bad press, right? That's what they say. So, okay, I think we can start winding things down. I think we're got a couple more little segments going. I think we could talk all day because there's just so much to talk about with the new advancements in AI and automation. Like everybody's, like I say it all the time, we're building the guardrails as the train's going down the track. And as a user and as a business, I don't think you should feel bad about that because that's what the people who are leading this industry are doing. But do your due diligence, set your governance, set your rules, keep your receipts. I think is really important. And I think one of the big things we could probably talk about, is the capstone of this is the brand advantage, the corporate hippocampus. I talk about this all the time that basically over the next decade or so, we're going to have what is equivalent to the burning of Alexandria in institutional
Right.
knowledge because people are retiring. Can you just talk about how it's so important to capture that corporate memory, the corporate memory?
Yeah, I mean, look, when you work with a brand strategy, and when we talked about brand, I think brands always like for certain people in leadership, some people roll their eyes at brands like branding, like we can't track it, so to speak, without like NPS scores and all that kind of stuff. But that's all changing. Just like why I mentioned the Canva example, like that's just visual identity. When you have brand identity baked into your system, and hundreds or thousands of workers using that same system, and that's baked in, and it's learning and it's optimizing every single day. It can optimize every in real time, right? We've never seen that before. This is a brand strategist like dream, right? And I really believe brands going to become more important. I mean, even Facebook, Meta changed their metrics. They used to be all about performance, but they found that if they gave everyone performance metrics, it kind of flatlined for everybody. And so the brand becomes more important because you're going to have to start to differentiate yourself. You need to position yourself differently. And when you have an AI that's wired into what your brand's about and learning from that, I think it's going to take it to another level. Now, the hippocampus is the part of the brain that consolidates memory, right? So a corporate hippocampus is the system that captures and organizes and makes retrievable everything your organization has ever learned, right? So in practical terms, it's three things. One, it's structured knowledge, right? Your policies, your playbooks, your approved language, your historical decisions. And we're not talking about like scattered in drives and wiki where it's connected and accessible to the AI. The second is interaction history, what customers asked, what you answered, what worked, what didn't, patterns that compound. The third is tribal knowledge, like tribal knowledge extraction, like the stuff in your senior people's head that they've never been documented, like how they handle edge cases, like really hard ones, right? How certain hard decisions get made. And so, and I think, Brad, when we spoke, you talked about how like boomers are retiring, institutional knowledge is disappearing. I hadn't thought about that. That's scary, right? Let's capture this. Let's capture this now because the corporate hippocampus is how you prevent that. You capture the knowledge before it walks out the door, and you structure it so the AI can use it.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that because I literally just got this arrived today, the Plod Note Pro or whatever. I'm just going to start recording. I got the unlimited plan. I'm going to start recording everything I do, like during my business day. Obviously, nothing crazy.
Yeah,
Not sitting on the couch, and then just see what comes of it. And because I already do all my meetings, I keep transcripts of all that. When I'm in the meeting, I let people know I'm doing it. But like that knowledge, there's so much knowledge that we miss just because we say something like just if you have an idea, bring out your phone, do a voice note, do something to like capture that information.
yeah, yeah,
Like what we like to do whenever we go down, we talk to some of these people who are like, about to retire and they're trying to capture all the data. We just go sit in a room with them, maybe order lunch, maybe if it's one of the other places, go get a happy hour, you just turn on, start recording and say, hey, so what do you do in your day? And just like let them talk, shut up. That's really hard for some technology folks in general. Just not the smartest person in the room. Let them, at least not about that specific case, let them talk.
right.
And it's funny you mentioned brand advantage too, because and I talked to about 40 students last Wednesday at Texas A&M, and they were asking for advice on what they should do. And I was like, the single most important thing you can do right now, other than having faith in your ability to figure things out, is build your brand. You need a personal brand as much as your company needs a brand, because right now you're just a stack of resumes that nobody is reading. It's robots reading that now. Nobody's doing that. And so the only way you're going to, I tell them go on LinkedIn, start building in public, start posting and make it real. Don't use LLMs to write your blog posts. Don't do all this other stuff. You can do that and then have the LLMs build the stuff for you and then just write about your journey to do that. But over time, if you start that, whenever you're 16 years old and a sophomore in high school, by the time you graduate college, just think of all the content you've created. Think about your digital footprint that these people says, because right now I can go do a deep dive on someone and print out a report in about 10 minutes that can gives me a dossier of someone. And it's like something that the FBI would have because it's just public knowledge. And I just have an
Right.
AI go do it and it brings it back to me. And whenever
Right.
you're building in public and you're sharing all that information, you're not only doing it for people to see it now, you're doing it for LLMs to see it. And so build your
Absolutely.
brand just like your company's building the brand.
Yeah. I'm getting a lot of inbound invitations to RFPs. I've never met the people, Michael. They're in the decision phase, and they're like, "We want you to bid." It's like, "Who are you?" Well, GPT told them, and that just tells me that. That also means that people are not like doing the research anymore. They're trusting AI 100%, which is probably fine. But it's just interesting how like decisions are being made. That's actually changing how all these algorithms are shifting around.
Yeah, but like chasing RFPs is one of the hardest things there is to do, right? It's one of the most frustrating things there is to do. Whenever they're coming to you, what? Like that's 80% of the work. Like that's the world they're trying to get at. You're as a young college student or as someone who's trying to upskill themselves and move away from this crappy company you work for, go to lynda.com, which is now LinkedIn Learning, take those courses or go to edX or take Harvard courses in your underwear on YouTube, and then start building in public and bake a brand. Go post on your LinkedIn once or twice a week. Go, not only that, go get involved with other people's, go follow other people that you look up to and get involved. I think that as things get more and more automated, the things that are going to matter most is the meaningful connection and the actual authentic connection. And the best way you can build your brand is get out there and talk to people. Go to the local AI conventions, go to meetups, there's a huge meetup about Claudebot and that blew up in San Francisco yesterday. And even then, you just don't know who you're going to meet,
Yeah.
and you can't do it just by sitting in your little bubble. You have to build that brand.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, I think we could talk for hours, but we're approaching an hour now. So I think we can start winding things down and maybe just do, a little rapid fire and we'll get some
Sure.
key takeaways. So rapid fire
Sure.
is just 36 seconds, just quick questions to just kind of throw some things out there. And so, what do you see as the biggest AI misconception across the board, but maybe even specifically to mid-market?
That it's about the technology. It's not. It's about the operating model. And I think you agree with this.
100%. Yeah.
The companies failing at AI have access to the same models as the ones winning. The difference is going to be coherence and the brand advantage.
Yeah, I say it all the time. Technology is the great equalizer. Gone are the days of all the largest organizations in the world having a technological advantage. It's over. It's done.
It's over.
People are moving faster now and doing things faster now. The guy who created Claudebot / OpenClaw, say what you want
Yeah.
about its security, say what it's like, but
Sure.
OpenAI was trying to do that. Anthropic was trying to do that.
Really?
Microsoft,
Okay.
Google.
I didn't know that. Okay.
No, so since then, Anthropic and since
So
that,
some hacker just did this on his own.
I mean, he was on the
And they
hacker.
couldn't
He's
take it?
very successful. He's had an exit of like 190 million or something. He's very well known, but
Okay.
he was literally just one guy who just says, I want to kind of do this myself.
He
And
figured it
it's
out.
funny,
Wow.
since he's done it, both Anthropic has come out with their Claude Code desktop app that takes control of your desktop and files and stuff. And then OpenAI released theirs this week too. And it's like that just shows you that the little guy, you're going to have one, two, 10-person companies that are billion-dollar companies. It's come up overnight because, again, it's all about execution, faith in your ability to figure things out, and then just using these tools. And I think if that's not a big, kick in the pants to go do something, go build something. Because ideas are a dime a dozen. It's execution. I say it all the time. What we do is not special. It's how we do it.
That's why coming from production helps a lot. Like I come
Yeah.
from execution, and then I moved
Yep.
into strategy, which is different. Like, it's not just I know how to deliver a PDF that works, and not just like here's the PDF. Oh, it doesn't work. Well, that's my no. I know how the nth degree, and that's really important that you can wrap these things up together like that.
Yeah, empathy is the biggest key. You need to understand what problem you're trying to solve. And for all their shortcomings, McKinsey and Company, that's what they prove. What problem are they trying to solve? All right, let's figure that out. And that's the number one thing. Okay, great. So what's the most underrated receipt KPI? I really want to know this one because that's the area I struggle with. Is what do I show? What do I track?
It's the hidden one. I think it's the reconciliation costs. How much time does your team spend fixing, reviewing, apologizing for, and cleaning up after the AI outputs? Right, that's hidden labor, and you need to start measuring it.
Yep, that's another good one. And it's definitely something I definitely need to move on my priority list for sure. One thing I did do is I created a Kanban board that's open source. It's called Veritas Kanban for tracking my AI agents. And so I had a visual representation of what they were doing, and I could assign them tasks in a DevOps process like people would understand. But
you gotta show me the back end. I want to see this.
Yeah, it's all markdown files in YAML, and it's that's
Okay.
the whole point. There's no storage, there's no nothing. That's the beauty of these tools. And but yeah, I'm happy to show it to you. And the the reason I did that is because I wanted to understand not all tasks are created equal. Whenever I ask it to go generate a PDF, what's that compared to writing a small SaaS product? And so
Right.
as part of that, I started
Right.
tracking the number of tokens it used, the
And
duration.
look what's going on with SaaS this week, all over like Bloomberg, all over the news. Some SaaS companies, simpler SaaS companies, are in trouble because we're going to be able to do local SaaS. Look, we don't have to talk about that, but I mean
No, I
that's
think
usually
it's a
just
great
an.
conversation. It's worth bringing up. I think we could see that through.
I not all SaaS are going. I mean, we still need SaaS. SaaS are going to sit. I was reading Scott Brinker's article. He wrote a great article about it from Martech, and what SaaS platforms have is coherence, and that's what probably they're going to change their lane from holding the data to holding the coherence for a company. And I think that's going to be valuable still. But I will say for something simpler like a HubSpot or Monday.com, I mean, you can almost already do that in an Excel sheet with Gemini, right? So like, there's going to be some, and this is a $5 billion company, right, being rocked, and I'm not surprised, but I would also say that competition is good, and it's why it helps things get stronger, and it exposes, like, if something is that replaceable, then like it needs to be replaced, and the times are changing, and so they need to upgrade or update what they're doing, and really think about the value they're bringing.
Yeah, and for those that are listening may not understand what we're talking about. Basically, CNBC was able to create Monday.com in like an hour using AI. Basically, the basic foundations of Monday.com in like an hour. And the funny thing is we're in the middle of renegotiating our contract with HubSpot and my company, and we all hate it. And I just said, what I'm going to do, I'm going to create my own.
You leverage that. I just saw the
No, I'm
news.
literally going to say, like, I'm creating my own digital sales room because it does 1,000 different things. We're a mid-market, a company that focuses on mid-market company. I need to do about 20 things, and I need to do those things really well, and I need to do them for one single pane of glass. QuickBooks is another one that's a freaking nightmare. We don't even go there,
I
but
hate
like, and so I
hate
can't wait
QuickBooks.
until people are just like, I launched this product, and there I went like, how do I launch a product and collect email addresses? There's like, go do this, and this. I'm like, no, I just built my own website in less than 24 hours and published it, did security checks, all that other sorts of thing, and just did it. And in the future, for those people who don't know, in the future, you're going to be able to just talk to your phone and say, "Hey, I need an app that does this," and it'll just build it for you. We're probably 2 or 3 years from doing it for your phone. But I do believe that not all SaaS is dead. And I had a conversation with someone yesterday, and I don't want to call it lazy SaaS, but like not special SaaS is dead. And so
Yeah,
something
that's
that has
fair. I think
secret
that's fair.
sauce and something that has a big one,
Mediocre SaaS.
yeah, mediocre. So like anything that has a community that is really, really important to the success of that
Yeah.
SaaS is going to be very,
Oh,
very important. And that's
yeah.
generally because the company embraces that community instead of trying to chase them away. And then anything that just has a special sauce, they have this the unique way of doing things that nobody else can do. That's gonna
Yeah.
survive. But like
Agreed.
another one, I was talking to a gentleman from Miro yesterday, and I was like, I don't really need Miro because I can just talk to my AI agent and have it do Excalibur and Obsidian, and it's free. Like it'll just automatically do it. And so like you guys have to come up with some ways to try to make that more positive. And hopefully you do,
And
because
I got
otherwise
Apple
it's a great
Freeform, which
business.
is almost the same thing. Exactly.
Exactly. There's many ways to skin a cat now. And I love the democratization. I just do. Power to the people, as they say. I could go on and on and on, but like, I'm glad you brought that up because that's just very important. Again, we're still very early on. The only people who can do this are the people who are crazy, like myself, and then also just the people that are just really passionate about it. Just throw risk to the wind. From a business perspective, we're a little bit further down the road. So, what's another? It hasn't been so rapid fire this time around, just because it's a great conversation. But what's governance? What's one governance rule you never skip?
An escalation threshold. Every AI workflow must have a defined trigger for when it stops and hands off to a human. No exceptions.
And if someone grabs your book and starts down this journey, what
Your
was
life is going to change forever.
all right? And again, we'll have links to the book and everything in the show notes in just a second. I'll wrap that up. But so, what would you say? What do you do in the first 30 days? Like, what we would just tell everybody to do in the first 30 days, whether they're $1 billion company, $1 million company,
Yeah.
a
And by the way,
solopreneur.
whether you're a $1 billion company or an AI first startup, it's not any different. It's not. Structure is structure is structure is structure. And I'll just say really quickly, I mentioned Steve Blank. And for those at large companies, this is like turned into what? Sigma 6 and all these other frameworks. They're just ripping off Steve Blank. Let's be honest, right? It's the same thing scaled out. But as a designer, look, I'm looking at the molecule. I'm looking at the atomic structure level. Why? Because I need to know that it doesn't break down any more than this. And then I could build it out, right? So the first 30 days, map your collisions, list every AI system that communicates externally or makes decisions internally. And then ask yourself, can two of these touch the same customer or employee? And can they contradict each other? It sounds simple, but it might not be as easy to do as you think. And start internal. Pick a workflow where mistakes create rework not brand damage. That's a little safer. You don't have to worry about the identity so much yet. Get your receipts working in a safe lane before you go external, and get used to like creating like your SOPs about your AI, like your server. Like what is this going to look like? Get into a rhythm so people understand like, oh, this is what it's going to be like to have AI. Got it, and then you can start to scale out from there. And then you expand one by one, carefully bounded customer workflow with hard red lines, and you have a kill switch, and that's like the engineering part of it. But then you need the taste, and the style, the creative part, because again, AI is going to be experiential. We can do it now. We're going to be talking to AIs. The tokens are expensive right now, but then when they get cheaper, you're going to have a her like experience in for employees and for customers. And I forget where I heard, maybe on another podcast, they said that something that hasn't been figured out that I think CEOs have a hard time with is remote working. Well, I think that can be solved with AI, because the remote working, the AI is your buddy. It's going to help you work. Like it's going to help you manage. You don't need to worry about a remote worker, because the AI could be, not that it's managing the person, but they're going to be relying on the AI to do the work. And so just by that, you're going to have receipts of everything they're doing anyway. So it's like, I think people have to start thinking in a new way about how
100%.
this is going. The ROI, I'm not going to even mention numbers. It's not going to be percentages. It's going to be, we're talking about multipliers here, 4 times, 10 times, like and that's per workflow. And so you just add up all that ROI, it's going to be through the roof. Uh, yeah, it's
Yeah.
exciting.
Yeah. And I'll just say, anybody who's worried about work from home, you're worrying about the wrong things. I've been work from home since far before COVID.
Yeah.
And I think you're focusing on the wrong. You said that people focus on the wrong things. We still teach kids like we have since the 1860s, right? Reading, writing, arithmetic. And we got to revolutionize that. We got to revolutionize how we think about business. Business is going to be the best people. The best workers are the ones who are always working. They're never stop working, but they pick up their phone and they do something, and then they go back to their families and do things like and just slowly
Yeah.
throughout the day. You don't worry about, did they get their 8 hours a day? Did they take
They don't need an electric fence.
No,
Don't give them an
no,
electric fence. Like
no.
let them
That's
roam.
whenever you do that, you're gonna have people who are just like, I'm shutting it off at 5 o'clock, and I
You
just
know,
don't understand that.
it's funny you mentioned that. Like I even asked GPT, like, I said, why do they force arithmetic and all this crap? And it's like, it's post-military industrial complex. They're looking for engineers. Like that's important, and all that. But I remember when I went to design school, and it's a great design, it's like a top design school. I was like a fish in water immediately. I was like, I'm not an idiot. I
Yeah,
thought, because I was like mediocre at math, like, oh, I'm never going to be a mathematician or whatever. I didn't understand what my skills were, because earlier phases of school didn't bring it out and never touched on it. And I think we have to think about the whole workforce a different way. But let's go back up. Where does it start from? From schooling. The schools are already behind. They're going to be behind for a while. I don't know. I'm not an expert in that, and I don't know how we're going to fix that. But I do touch on like change management in the book. But this has to flow from the education system as well. And I think, I don't know, Brad, do you have an answer for that one?
yeah. We got to be outcome driven. We got to move to an
Yeah,
outcome driven society. Again, we have a problem to solve. We solve it. We don't. How did you get there? How long did it take? That's all stuff you keep for metrics for your receipts, right? But that's not something you need to dwell on, because as the longer you dwell on that, the further it keeps you away from the next thing you're going to build, and the next thing you're going to build. And like I've always, because I was a hiring manager working for large corporate 500 type companies, enterprise type companies. And I even told I would never tell my bosses this, but I'd say, dude, if you get your work done in 30 hours, I don't care if you browse Reddit. I don't care if you're watching YouTube.
yeah.
You're getting your work done. You're meeting your
I'm the
metrics. You're
same
exceeding
way.
expectations. I don't care. Like,
I'm the same way. I agree.
people are going to be able to do even more now. If I have someone who utilizes AI and they can do the work of 10 people, and they want to have a 4-day work week, well, okay, you're doing the work of 10 people.
You're paying for the responsibility of the outcome. That's what the focus should be on. Not, and I think this is going to take a minute, because we're used to like how many files is you outputted. It's got to be a different kind of metric.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's just something that changes as the generations retire. It just is. You get more and more. You get more used to the newer ways of doing things. And
Yeah.
that's my biggest thing I tell people now is like, if you're unhappy, start your own business. There's no better time in the history of the world than to start your own business. You can do it while you're still working. There's really no time better. I'm so jealous that I started my business 3 years ago that I don't have all the tools I have today that to do 3 years, because it would save me a whole lot of time and headache and heartbreak.
You're doing great, Brad.
No,
You're doing great.
I am, but
I'm
you know what I
impressed.
mean? Like, now I'm just trying to encourage folks, like, now is the time. You can do this. And so thanks again, Alan, for joining us. Really, really appreciate it. We'll have all the links to his books and the things we've talked about, all the resources, and the newsletter that comes out on LinkedIn, linktree.com/digitalmeld. And the newsletter is right at the top of that. Again, we're on YouTube and Spotify and video, and then audio everywhere else. If you like this podcast, if you appreciated it, We would love it if you give it a like and a rating on whatever platform you choose. It really helps us. And then also to reach out to Alan, and definitely, again, we'll have a link to his book to go to his book. I'm about to open the floor to him in a second. And then just something from us, we did just launch something much in line with what Alan just talked about. It literally launched an hour before I got on this podcast, but brainmeld.io. We're looking for, it's open source. We're looking for people to get involved. So if you're listening and you want to get involved to help shape this intelligence layer, AIOS, I think some people call it.
Use your can I use it to build my solutions? I like
Yeah,
this.
100%. Yeah.
All
So
right,
yeah,
I'll check it out.
awesome. Yeah. So again, Alan, thanks for joining us. So I'm just gonna open the floor for you for 2 or 3 minutes. Tell people where they can find you. Tell them about the book, where they can grab that, and anything you'd like to tell them.
Sure. I'll just say you need an AI operating system, no more tools, not until you get the system. You need governance and brand identity and receipts. The goal isn't automation. The goal is compounding advantage. Okay. And you can reach me at my agency is nobledigital.com, but the actual solution is bxaios.com well, go to the / shadow hyphen ledger, and there'll be an assessment there that kind of lets you see where you're at and see how far you have to go and give you some tips on what you can do. I think you'll find that valuable. And of course, you can go to my personal site to contact me, Allen Martinez, ALLEN, Martin with an EZ.net. If you want to reach out to me directly.
Yeah, and we'll have I'll have popped all that stuff on the screen as you're talking about it. But again, it'll be in the show notes and the newsletter that comes out. And we'll tag you on LinkedIn, and everybody will hopefully get in contact with you. And I guess it's one thing we haven't really asked. Everybody's free to contact you, and you'll just have a conversation with anyone, I imagine, huh?
Not everybody. No, I'm kidding. It depends. But I do want to, before I forget, I want to say I'm going to give you the link for the free chapter. They can read chapter 1 for free.
Awesome.
And check it out before they get the book. But I think you'll understand the entire thesis of the system. And I think it'll hopefully get you excited about how deep it's going to go.
Yeah, and I will tell our listeners that I did read the first chapter, and I really loved it because it really spoke to me, because it's like I in my feedback to Alan, I was like, it felt more like a manifesto, which I thought was really great. It's more like, you don't have a lot of time to waste. Let's just get to the point, and I really like that.
Yep.
And all of it was, I didn't disagree with any of it at all. I think it's all really well principled. Just everything he said here. We preach SOPs, we preach security and governance, we preach process. That's process. And so we're right in that same vein. So yeah, just any last 2 words, Alan?
Thanks for having me. Great conversation. You really know your stuff, Brad.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And look forward to maybe in 6 months to a year, come back on, and we'll see how things have been going, and how we've gotten on our journey of creating this infrastructure to hopefully help people unlock it. Until then,
2026 is going to be excited.
Yeah, it's already crazy and crazy. Again, listeners, thank you for joining us. Everything we've talked about, linktree.com/digitalmeld. The newsletter will be at the top. We'll get you a link to that book, and at least the first chapter. But again, we love having conversations with folks like Alan, and really just helps us if you reach out to him and take advantage of some of the things he's offering. And so just make sure you do that. And until next week, we'll talk to you later. Bye-bye. We want to hear about your AI and automation journey, and we'd love for you to get involved with Start Small, Think Big. If you'd like to participate or offer feedback, please reach out to us anytime via email at contact@digitalmeld.io, or use the contact form on our website, digitalmeld.io/contact. Also, please help spread the word by liking, subscribing, and sharing our podcasts on your podcast platform of choice. Thanks.